you very much. Padmavajra. Again yogin abchangsam Padma kesadung bola Yatsen joging adrubnye Padma jungne she sudrak Kodo kandro mangpoko Kiki jesu dadrupki Chingirapchi shek suso Guru Padma Siddhi Hung, to the northwest of the land of Urgyen, on the calyx of a lotus flower. O wondrous, the highest Siddhi has been attained. O thou who art encircled with an entourage of Dakinis, following thy example will I work. Thou must come here to give me thy blessing. So that's a very, very famous, celebrated chant in my attempts at pronouncing Tibetan, invoking the greatly precious Guru, Padmasambhava. And it's said when you recite this 7-line invocation, which is known as the White Lotus prayer, Padmasambhava is present. Who am I to argue with the great Nyingma Tibetan tradition, the great followers of Padmasambhava, and in the tradition as well as the mantra of Padmasambhava, Om Ma Hum Vajra Guru Padma Siddhi Hum. This invocation is chanted again and again and yet again, over and over and over, invoking the presence of the greatly precious Guru. Padmasambhava is just so extraordinarily important in Tibetan Buddhism. One scholar, very fine American woman scholar named Janet Gyatso, in a book on a great Tibetan yogi, described Tibetan culture as a culture of longing. A culture of longing, very interesting expression. A culture of longing for the return or the presence of Guru Padmasambhava. Padmasambhava in the 8th century was at the great vanguard of introducing the Dharma, Buddhist tradition, Buddhist practice among the Tibetan people. And he's associated with a great age of unity among the Tibetans, a great sense of order, and his leaving of the country. He didn't die, he just went away. We might be able to find out where a bit later, but was sort of catastrophic for his disciples. And he said, but if you call on me, I will come. If you call on me, I will be with you. I am there with you. I am a potentiality with you all the time. So I thought it appropriate to begin with the invocation to the greatly precious Guru, Guru Rinpoche, Padmasambhava, the Lotus-born. And we're looking at Padmasambhava as one of the archetypes of enlightenment. This Dharma night at the moment is exploring different Buddha images, Buddhist archetypes. These expressions, if you like, of enlightenment, of the enlightened mind, to use that sort of language. These communications of reality. I'm sure that the different speakers have talked already about the fact that the descriptions of enlightenment in Buddhism and of Buddhist practice are not simply in terms of concepts and ideas. Buddhism is very sophisticated with its ideas and its analysis, brilliant analyses of the path and the goal and so on. But it also speaks and communicates through symbols, through images, through story, through myth, this is an area of Buddhist practice, I think, probably not so well known in the West, this great sort of emphasis on secularization and technology, kind of the technology of meditation and de-stressing and all that. That's leaching Buddhism of its real power, which is in its imagery, its symbol, its myth, its stories, its people. It's people living a rich Buddhist life. And when it comes to Padmasambhava's imagery, we have a difficulty. I have a difficulty. I've been meditating on Padmasambhava for a long time, and the more I meditate on this particular form, this particular figure, the more I reflect on this particular figure, the less I know, or the less I feel I can really say. It's very interesting when it comes to symbols and myths. When I was a youngster, when I was a young lad, I loved reading what my dear friend Arloka, very close friend of mine, another order member, called mind-rotting tantric literature. We'd devour it when it came out. Anything on Buddhist tantra was for us. And of course, you get all this imagery, but there's an enormous amount of explanation, which we also devoured. And, it's almost like spot the bodhisattva. You can tell that this is this bodhisattva and this Buddha because, they're holding their hands in a particular way and they're this particular colour and they're doing this and they're doing that and all the rest of it. Of course, that isn't really the point. That isn't really the point of a symbol, a myth, an image. It's something direct. There are things you can say, but it's the whole realm of undefined and undefinable meaning, which communicates to your total being, your heart, your head too, actually, but your total being. And when it comes to Padmasambhava, the mythology associated with this figure is bizarre. I was thinking today about, maybe I'll tell you some stories from this, and you'll think, blimey, this is like Harry Potter on acid. This is seriously weird. This is really out there, and I would actually be giving you edited highlights, sort of a bit, diluted, because it's not after 10 o'clock. You know what I mean? So it, and then you can start wondering, what on earth has this got to do with my life in 21st century London, where I'm paying a mortgage, I'm working really hard, I've got to put food on the table for the kids. What on earth has this got to do with anything? Well, that's for you to decide. That's not for me to decide. So I'm going to have a go, because there is a lot you can find on Padmasambhava. An enormous amount of literature, and a lot have been translated into English. And it's bizarre and it's strange. And what we have to do is to see whether it resonates. So I'm just going to pick out a few bits and pieces. He's regarded, of course, by the Tibetans as a strictly historical figure. And by Western scientific historical standards, there's a grain of evidence for the existence of an Indian sort of monk, yogi, magician, wizard who went to Tibet and had some sort of effect. But among the Tibetans, the stories just proliferate. The mythology just explodes. And of course, for some people in the West, this is a serious problem. There's friends of mine who, is this really history? But, it's never particularly interesting me. It's true. It's just true. But it's not true as we know it, Jim. It's a different kind of truth that speaks to you in a very different way. My first encounter with Padmasambhava was of a reproduction of a tanka from the Victorian Albert Museum. It's this tiny magician-like figure in this form that you have here, but it's not this particular image. And this in the centre of this palace, surrounded by bizarre creatures sort of dancing in space male and female sort of gods and goddesses and demons, and these sort of red figures with numerous eyes, some of their eyes in their bellies and things like this. This riotous display, and this figure at the centre of it with this delighted, sort of wrathful, semi-wrathful, blissed out, wise expression just at the centre of this dance. Totally, not exactly organising it, not like that, but rejoicing in it, making it possible for this great swirl of energies. And, for a teenager, late teens, this really, really struck me with real sort of force. Before I even knew what this figure was about, I was beginning to read about particularly Tibetan Buddhism, and this archetype, I suppose, of the highly accomplished yogi, magician, all-knowing, highly, virtuosic teacher, whatever you want to call it, was extremely attractive, and it was one of the reasons why I wanted to pursue a Dharma life. So yes, we are in a strange world, and I want to, start at the beginning, I suppose, of Padmasambhava's myth and story with his birth. Padmasambhava literally means lotus-born, one born from a lotus, because according to some of the stories, he was born from a lotus. Didn't have a mum and dad. He was that invocation that I chanted expresses that hung in the northwest of the land of Urgyen. Northwest land of Urgyen is Udayana, probably the region of the Swat Valley now in Pakistan. That's probably the area he came from, an area known for its great yogis and mystics. Later era known for its Sufis and so on. So, a real sort of spiritual hotspot. But where he was born was in this magnificent lake of lotuses, this magic realm in this country. And yes, he sort of popped out of a lotus, fully formed at 8 years old. And the descriptions are visionary in the text that describe this. They describe this miraculous child as the colour of the purple of seashells, which I think is a wonderful detail. Just sitting there in this lotus with a little water pot and a little staff, just sitting there. And he was discovered by the king of the land, who was childless. Hadn't had any offspring, and of course, so there's no heir to the throne, so he's getting a bit desperate. And then he hears reports of this miraculous child, so of course he rows out into the lake with his ministers of state, and there is this creature, this foundling, just sitting there on a lotus. And of course, there's the question, who are your parents? So this is an 8-year-old child talking. Who are your parents? My father is great compassion, and my mother is the vastness of wisdom, the space of great wisdom. What nourishes you? I am nourished on perplexity. And why are you here? Why are you here in a lotus? I have come here out of compassion for all living beings. I think we really have to try and imagine, sometimes children, they can seem like old people, don't they? You do notice that with children. They kind of come out with these sort of gnomic sayings, and you want to sort of bow down to them. Well, you've really got it, fully in this particular image of this purple child speaking with this ancient wisdom. It's quite sort of spooky in a way when you read the text. And of course the king is delighted, and he takes him back to his palace and brings him up as his son. He's training him to be the next king of the land. Unfortunately, things started to go badly wrong. Always a bit risky, I think, to adopt a child born from a lotus. Ordinary children can be hard enough, but a child that you find in a lotus is sort of asking for trouble, really. But I want to, before I say what happened, I want to just pause and just talk about this image of the child, the 8-year-old child, born from a lotus. Being born from a lotus in Buddhist symbolism evokes purity. The lotus in Buddhist tradition is the image of purity, utmost purity, the purity of enlightenment. The fully opened lotus growing above the great muddy lake is the symbol of enlightenment itself. The Buddha, of course, had that great vision of all living beings as lotuses growing up out of the lake, out of the mud. In other words, seeing that our real nature is our potential for enlightenment, for the fullness of wisdom and compassion. So in that sense, we're all actually on the path to becoming the Lotus-born. In the end, if we follow the path through, we are going to be reborn. Not literally, don't take me literally. Well, maybe, why not take me literally? But reborn out of a lotus. But it's what I want to dwell on with Padmasambhava. Padmasambhava's tradition, his tradition of teaching, emphasizes purity, but in a very special way. What's called primordial purity. This isn't about going back to childhood. It's not the symbol of the 8-year-old child. Actually doesn't have anything to do with childhood in the ordinary sense. What it's evoking is this purity which is above and beyond the ravages of time. It's the purity of the eternal, of the timeless, of that which is beyond. And in Padmasambhava's tradition, and his tradition, his insight is into the fact that actually our nature is this primordial purity. The real nature of our awareness, which is not really our awareness, it's just the real nature of awareness, because in this quality of awareness there is no self and there is no other. But the real nature, the metaphors that Padmasambhava and his disciples use are very interesting. The real nature of awareness, mind, consciousness, life is fresh, sparkling, ever youthful, ever creative, unsullied by anything we might do to it. Unfortunately, this can be rationalised sometimes. People can get up to some sort of dodgy stuff and say, well, it doesn't affect my sparkling, fresh, luminous mind. But of course it does, because it covers it over so that you can't see it and others can't see it. But there's this tremendous faith, if you like, tremendous vision that Padmasambhava and his tradition has into our potentiality. We have access to this quality of enlightened consciousness, fresh, sparkling, creative, expressive, alive, luminous, empathic, loving, compassionate, energetic. All these qualities. That's the nature of things. That's the real nature of things. That's what Buddhist practice is trying to get us to realise all the time. So this image of the child in the lotus is expressing that. It's expressing that. It's a vision of what is possible. But although there is vision, and vision is a wonderful thing, vision is only the beginning. The vision of that kind of mind or that kind of quality, that vision of enlightenment, is a start. Actually, it's sort of fairly easy in a way to have a vision. I think it's quite common for people to have an inkling of something. But in Buddhism, and for the Padmasambhava tradition, you don't just have vision, you also have transformation. There's a great teaching of Padmasambhava which says you descend with the vision and you ascend with the conduct. You ascend with the transformation. A very, very important teaching. Yes, you have a vision, but that needs to descend and penetrate and pervade every area of your life. Nothing must be left out of that vision. Everything must be transformed in the light of that vision. So you need to make the effort to transform, to engage in the conduct, the action that brings that vision into every area of your life. So anyway, to go on with the story, he's taken into the kingdom. He's trained as the next prince, the son and heir, so important in Indian tradition. I take this to mean that one way we can interpret it is that one of the things that can happen is that we can have a vision of possibility. We can have a vision of maybe some of you had a vision of possibility on the summer retreat or something like that, or anywhere. It can come on the bus, in the countryside. It can be sparked off by any set of circumstances. It can come out of pondering the unsatisfactoriness of your life and the frustrations with it. Something opens up where you see possibility for a moment. But what can happen is that we try to domesticate it. We try to domesticate vision. We take it into the palace or our flat or, our bedsit or our semi-detached or even our community, even our Buddhist community. We try to sort of tame it because we like the idea that we have a vision of possibility. We might even like the idea of, I'm sort of a Buddhist, or I'm, cool about Buddhism, and, I'm a nice person, good person. But we don't really want it to change us. We want to domesticate Buddhism and just sort of, this vision of possibility and just carry on in the same way. But the thing is, when you really see, you can't really do that. Domestication actually leads to riots, I think, when if you have an intensity of vision. And in Padmasambhava's case, he started to get very, very frustrated as he grew up within the kingdom, within the palace. He was a great athlete. He was great at everything. This is the way they tell the story. And the energy was just going a bit crazy, confined within the kingdom. And you have to remember, this is India, ancient India, with caste and, all those duties and all that sort of thing, around all that kind of conditioning, extended family and how stifling that can be. He started to act crazy. I can't go into all the things that he got up to, but it was just too much. And it was so scandalous, so controversial, so shocking. He did so many dodgy things that the ministers had to say to the king, he's got to go. Either execution, you just quietly do away with him, or banishment, exile, which is what happened. Banished, exiled, sent out into the wilderness. So it can be like that, I think. I think if you neglect your vision, if you neglect your intuition about a different kind of life, a higher life, if you like, a life moving, Kustasara was talking about moving out beyond, moving out of the safety zone of our lives. If you've had a vision of that possibility, you're not going to be able to control it. It is going to start affecting things. You might try to push it down. If you do that, I don't think nice things happen. I mean, I think a lot of depression can be a lot to do with the repression of our vision of possibility. Sangharakshita, our teacher, once said he thought some criminal activity was sort of just dammed up energy which wanted to live differently, live in a more expansive way, living in a way where you're growing and expanding and changing and transforming in the light of your vision, but you just haven't found the context in which to do that. So, this stuff, this material, if something has opened up for you, don't squander that. Don't play with that. Don't waste it. It won't just go away quietly. It will. My dear friend Arloka talks a lot about this. Is a slightly different point, but I think it's the same point. He's a great believer in serving the gods of useless endeavours. He's always saying this when he's encouraging me just to play with paint. He said, if you don't serve the gods of useless endeavours, they come round and bite your bum. And it's the same with vision. It's the same with vision. It's the same with that calling to something higher. If you don't follow that, if you don't give that attention, it's not going to go quietly. There is going to be riots. The heart is going to rebel in some way or other. So if you've seen something, if you're feeling something, if you're having a response to something, maybe not really dramatically, but gently, gradually, start making that the centre of things. Start turning to that. Start turning in the direction of the Lotus-born, the 8-year-old child talking wisdom. Listen to that wisdom, that youthful wisdom that's in your inner ear. Listen to that. Pay attention to that. It's not crazy. It's not crazy. There's wisdom there. There's knowledge there. There's real knowing there. Where was Padmasambhava exiled to? Exile was pretty good. The Buddha, of course, went forth, left home quite consciously to become a monk. Padmasambhava is a bit more extreme. He's exiled. This is one of the things you get very similar tropes in the life of Padmasambhava to the life of the Buddha, but they're sort of turned up in volume in such a way as to kind of shock you. So he's decided. Well, he doesn't decide. The courtiers decide to exile him in a really unpleasant place, the Sitavana, which means the cold forest or the cool grove, which is a great cremation ground, a great cemetery. India at that time, again, we seem to have had these great cemeteries, these lonely places outside of the cities, usually out near villages, where the dead are just left. They're just left there to rot away. Occasionally, the people and of course they would be regarded as outcasts by Hinduism. People would come along to burn the dead bodies in great pyres. It's a place of jackals and all sorts of weird creatures. So he was exiled there. He had to go to this place, which of course for him was perfect. Great, so extreme, because these cremation grounds, certainly in Tantric Buddhism, which Padmasambhava is very much associated with, yes, they are way beyond the pale. They really are outcast, impure places, the places of the dead. Death is regarded as impurity within traditional Hindu religion. So to actually go and stay there is to really enter into taboo, to go to the most taboo places possible. But this is also the place where the yogis and the siddhas and the tantric adepts and Buddhist monks come to that. They go to meditate. They go to the cremation ground. They go into these places. They go into these places, of course, because they're lonely places. You're not going to be bothered there by any Buddhist ecclesiastics or ordinary people. They're just going to think you're impure and nuts to go to the cremation ground? Why would you want to go and spend your days and nights in a place where the dead are brought, which is a haunted place, full of ghouls and zombies and all that sort of thing? Why would you go there? But it's regarded for that very reason as a place of initiation, a place where you're initiated into the mysteries of the Dharma, where you're initiated into the mysteries of yourself, the mysteries of the Buddhas, where you discover yourself, where you go alone, where you're just with yourself and the reality of life and death all around you. On the iconography here, I don't know if you can make it out, but in Padmasambhava's hand he's holding a skull cup or a skull bowl. So it's the top of a skull turned the other way up to make a bowl filled with rakta, which is blood or nectar, same thing. This little detail, this is one of the ways iconography works. It reminds us of Padmasambhava in the cremation grounds. Actually, he didn't just stay in this place called the Cold Forest. He went from one cremation ground to another, the great 8 cremation grounds of India at that time. And in the life stories of Padmasambhava, these cremation grounds are so important, they're described with extraordinary vividness, incredibly vivid. I should really have brought a text to read it to you, because it really is sort of magnificent in its description of what goes on. Yes, there's the description of these weird, trees in the cremation ground, very weird trees that whose roots draw on the water of the dead, and whose fruits are the expression of that. And these trees have a sort of magic force about them. That's just the trees. But then there are all these strange hybrid creatures, sort of half man, half yak, half lion, all sort of mixed up, doing all sorts of weird things. And these characters, these figures called the Dakinis. The Dakini is a term you'll come across if you read particularly Tantric Buddhist literature, and the notion of Dakini exists on a number of levels. The Dakinis in the cremation grounds are called worldly Dakinis. These are more like sort of how can I describe them? They're sort of flesh-eating, blood-drinking goddesses. That's what they are. You can imagine, ancient India at a certain time. These cremation grounds would be associated with figures like that, and they are fabulous. These creatures. I mean, I'm sure if one actually walked in, I'd run. I wouldn't want to stay. But there's loads of them. They're different colours. They're red and they're blue and they're black and they're yellow. And they dance and they do all sorts of wonderful things, like cutting over their stomachs and spilling out their entrails, or ripping out their hearts, which they eat. They change sex, just like that, go from woman to man to back again. Just dancing around. Really, really frightening creatures to most people, but it's very interesting in these descriptions in the text. They're beautiful. They're extraordinarily beautiful. Really bizarre, really weird, but astonishingly beautiful. And it's said that Padmasambhava would sit leaning with his back against what's called a stupa, a Buddhist funerary tower, and he'd sit there ecstatic, watching these Dakinis, just watching their play, their endless, bizarre play. Unafraid, going red, looking at them, and it said that he would teach them. He'd teach them the Dharma. He'd communicate Buddhism to them, to these figures. So a really important episode in the life of Padmasambhava, and very, very evocative, meditated upon again and again and again in Buddhist tradition. So a little reflection on the symbolism here is, and I want to relate it to this business of transformation, vision and transformation. One of the things you have to really face up to in your Buddhist practice, in your life, and we heard about it this evening already, is of course death. You know, the great mystery, the great taboo. You have to engage with that. In that sense, you have to go to the cremation ground. In fact, Buddhist tradition says, Tantric tradition says, we're in it already. We don't actually have to go out into the countryside and find an Indian cremation ground, which I wouldn't be able to do in rural Norfolk. I could go up to the local church, but it might be a bit different, a bit spooky perhaps. But it's here. They say that the 8 great cremation grounds are situated in the 8 consciousnesses recognised by Yogacara Buddhism. In other words, they're in our consciousness, they're in our life right now because of universal impermanence. We're in the cremation ground. Everything that arises passes away. There is this continuous arising and passing. Nothing stays the same. Nothing is stable. There is constant change. Constant change. You just have to look into yourself. You'll just see that. You know, all the sort of physical processes going on. Your mind flitting about, sometimes concentrating on my words, sometimes drifting off, wondering if you're going to get that bus and get home and, you know, watch the news or whatever it is. There's just constant flickering change all the time. And of course, the other important, crucially important thing that Buddhist tradition says, that death is absolutely certain, notwithstanding developments in technology. Death is absolutely certain, and no one knows when that will happen. Life is actually always on the edge. Life and death are just 2 sides of one coin. So one of the things that one has to do as a Buddhist practitioner, you cannot ignore it because it's part of life, is waking up to this fact. Waking up to this fact, recognising that we are in the cremation ground. And of course, that can be quite a frightening thought, even a very frightening thought. Sometimes as you practice the Dharma, you haven't even been particularly conscious of mortality or anything like that. But the sheer fact that you're developing yourself according to your vision, that you're transforming yourself, is invoking change. I don't think people quite realise this when you come along to a meditation class. First time you're told it's all about relaxation, all that sort of thing. I'd never tell that to anybody. I want to say, no, this is dangerous. This is dangerous because as soon as you sit down and start looking at your breath, you're immediately looking at change, the arising and passing of the breath. It's not even clear whether you are actually going to get to breathe in again. Don't meditate on that. Not at the moment. That metabhavna practice, which you might struggle with, it's invoking change. Well, that sometimes you can start sensing that on a very deep level. You know, it sometimes happens as you practice that a deep, deep fear can start arising because you're changing. You're coming to the edge of what you know. You're coming to the edge of who you think you are. And of course, we love the idea of transformation, of changing into a better person. But when it actually comes to it, it's so different from what we're used to, or the prospect is so different. Well, it freaks us out. You know, it really freaks us out. I still feel this. Sometimes on retreat, I've got a joke going with a friend of mine at Padmavajra. We've got a sort of shorthand, and they say, how are things going? I said, touch of the existentials. Touch of the existentials. And there's nothing that I can put my finger on. It's just the intensification of Buddhist practice is opening things up in a way which is unnerving. But it's also exhilarating. That's the point. That's what the Dakinis are about. These crazy forms. Look at one way, they're terrifying. You know, you just want to run out of that cremation ground. You want to give up Buddhism completely. You just want to, just put your head under the pillow. Just forget about all this idea of transformation. Stupid idea. Let's not bother. Let's just live let's start a tobacconist on the Edgware Road or something. So it's a bit of a joke. I had another friend of mine. Just forget it. But on the other side, there's this exhilaration. Because there's energy. There's tremendous energy and inspiration in play. That's the other side of impermanence. We tend to think of impermanence as loss. But it's not, actually. It's always gain, really. It's always this transformation. It's the nature of things. It's change. You're not losing. You're entering into this life of, abundance and creativity. And when we meditate, when we practice, when we see, when we live this life, we can start to sense that, much, much more fully. Start to feel that, start to notice that, and enjoy it. Enjoy the openness. Enjoy the unbounded nature of things, rather than just closing it down, finding another label to describe ourselves. Labels, who needs them? Even the label Buddhist, in some ways is not entirely accurate. Our ordination is called the Dharmacharini ordination. Chari and charini mean one who courses in the Dharma, in the truth, one who moves in it, even revels in it, if you like. It's something that's constantly changing and moving. That's, if you have one of these, it means that's what you're doing. You're not resting on your laurels, or you should be. If you see any of us with these resting on our laurels and getting very, very fixed, give us a kick up the bum, because, we're not living this exhilarating, ecstatic life that is the Dharmachari life, living in accordance with impermanence, like Padmasambhava. Time's running out, and I do need to draw to a close. I talked about energy there. So I want to sort of end with one other symbol, really. You'll see on Padmasambhava, in his right hand, he has this, you might not be able to see it from the back, it's called a vajra. It's like a sort of scepter, a sort of golden scepter. It's a thunderbolt or a lightning bolt. That's what it's said to symbolise. What's being got at here is the tremendously focused energy of Padmasambhava, of enlightenment. That's what the vajra is. A vajra is, you imagine lightning. There were some fantastic lightning storms recently up in Norfolk. But if you can imagine the energy of lightning, of a bolt of lightning, imagine that caught, if you can imagine such a thing, and essentialized as something you could carry in your hand. And if necessary, unleash. If necessary. That's what the vajra is. What it's symbolizing is an attainment, is a realization, is the realization of the full energy of the Buddha's wisdom and compassion. This is really, it's full transforming power. That's what Padmasambhava masters with all his practices in the cremation ground, in all his meditations and visualizations, mantra recitations, special yogic practices, and so on and so forth, living in this very, very intense way. It's to gather and purify and intensify the energy lightning bolt energy of enlightenment itself. It's sort of primordial energy. It's not energy that really has any source. It's the energy that pours out of the full realization of selflessness. The full realization of selflessness. It's that kind of energy. And of course, it's energy held with tremendous morality, for want of a better word, tremendous ethical probity. You know, sometimes when our energy is up, we become very insensitive. You know, we can sometimes impose our energy on other people in a very insensitive way. You know, if things are going well for us, we're a bit high. You know, we can sort of spread it around, which can make other people very, very uncomfortable. But this isn't like that. This is energy held within the context of a pure and ethical life. And it's an energy that can be employed and used for the good of the world. Padmasambhava's vajra really takes on its... It comes into its own when he goes to Tibet. The conversion of Tibet is very, very interesting. The great king Trisong Detsen in the 8th century wanted to build a great temple and monastery laid out like a wonderful sort of mandala palace, sacred circle full of Buddha images, full of the monks and nuns and laymen and laywomen, yogis and yoginis could go and practice in, and where the teachings could be taught. You know, a wonderful place. And the builders would build in the day. But the Tibetan gods of the soil and goddesses of the soil and the waters and the air would take it down at night. It would go up in the day, and the next morning everything was ripped apart. The local deities didn't like it. They didn't want it to go up, or you could say the deep psyche, you know, within the Tibetan unconscious did not want this to happen. There was a resistance, you know, to the emergence, to the establishment of the Dharma in that country. Because you have to remember, Tibetans, they say of themselves, they're the red-faced barbarians, very, very warlike people, very, very sort of heavy people in many, many ways. You know, in a way, it's one of the last places you'd think Buddhism would have gone to, given the nature. I'm just saying what the Tibetans say themselves. This is not, you know, my own view of Tibetan. So you're talking about very, very deep forces. And Padmasambhava was called to Tibet because he was the only person known who would be able to deal with these deep unconscious forces. And he spent a year just going around the Tibetan mountains and plateaus and rivers and lakes, having these incredible magic encounters. I mean, it really is like something out of, well, it's even more extreme than anything out of Harry Potter. But these big magical contests with these, you know, incredible creatures, these great sort of dragons and snow lions and giant yaks. And again, they're shapeshifters, these local deities. They keep changing form. You can't sort of get hold of them. They're very, very violent. But Padmasambhava they just can't catch him. They just can't get him. And his vajra is tremendously important. This enlightened energy engages with these deep forces. There are images of Padmasambhava where his vajra, and it's held in a mudra called the demon transformation mudra, like this. There are some wonderful images of him holding out this vajra, and there's a little sort of demon kneeling down like this in relation to the vajra. But it's really interesting what happens. Yes, there's the magical contest, but once that's calmed down, and you know they get wise, the demons, and they start to really love Padmasambhava because you know he's just this intense loving force. I mean, it's you know that's the he's very, very attractive to these miscreants. Miscreants, that's a nice old-fashioned word. He shows them the vajra, And they say, the text say they reveal and they give the heart of their lives. And they then say they will protect the Dharma, they will protect his teaching, they will support it, they will serve it. And this expression, the heart of their lives, is very interesting. The Tibetan word for this is nyingpo. Nyingpo means heart or essence. It's also the translation of the Indian bija, which means Sanskrit word bija, which means seed. And it is the heart of their lives, but it's their name, their secret hidden name, which is their life force. And this is a tremendous detail, I think, and it is sort of relevant, I think, to us. Very often we're in the grip sometimes of very negative forces like addictions and aversions and, catastrophic attractions and obsessions and, weird energies, even sort of violent forces, but we don't really know their name. We don't really know what they are. We haven't pinned them and called them, so we don't know them. And they haven't revealed their heart to us, so they have power over us. So one of the things that we have to be doing in Buddhist practice, if we're to draw on more energy, if we're to summon energies which will protect and enrich our Dharma practice, we've got to name what is in us and what is around us. We've got, and the trouble is these forces are they're shapeshifters, they keep moving, but you need to name them and get to know them and incorporate them and transform them into your Buddhist practice, into your Buddhist life. This is what Padmasambhava does with the gods of Tibet. And yes, they become protectors, and in the end the demons of Tibet start helping to build the great monastery. And then there's a wonderful consecration of the monastery where all the Buddha images, Padmasambhava does the consecration, the images get off their throne and start walking around, mingling with people. Wouldn't it be amazing if Padmasambhava was here and Amitabha suddenly got off and started to have a chat with you and ask you about your meditation practice and things like that. In other words, Padmasambhava, through his energy, brings alive enlightenment itself for people, brings that alive for people, shows it as a reality in their lives. So when we invoke Padmasambhava, and we invoke him through the Padmasambhava mantra, through that invocation, that's what we're trying to bring into the world, trying to bring into the room, if you like. We're trying to bring in this quality of vision and the transformation of every aspect of our lives, so that enlightenment pervades absolutely everything we do in our life and world. I'm just going to end. I think we're just going to, I really think it's important that we invoke Padmasambhava. I know it's a bit late, but could we just do 5 minutes of Padmasambhava mantra? So I'll start us off in the mantra, and we're going to do it in I said at the beginning of this talk that Tibetan culture is a culture of longing. So the mantra form we're going to do is a very longing form of the mantra. Really just call out this mantra and, see what happens. Just see what happens. Om Ahum Vajra